Hello everyone. Why am I holding a canvas, you ask? Excellent question. I am going to show you in today's video how I prep a canvas before I paint it. Now, in terms of supplies, you will need a canvas, obviously. You will also need a foam brush. I prefer to use a foam brush as opposed to a brush with hairs just because I feel like it gives it a smoother brush stroke. Yeah, it's still called a brush. Okay. You will also obviously need gesso. Now, I don't have a specific brand that I can recommend to you. I tend to just go with whatever says thick. The thicker the gesso, the fewer layers you have to put down in order to get a smooth surface, which is what I'm trying to achieve here. Now, the first step is actually wetting the back of your canvas. Now, if you are someone who, like me, likes to load up their brush with a lot of water, if you are painting on an unprimed canvas, like not primed by yourself, I realize that all of these canvases, at least the one that I'm holding, is technically primed. It does have like a very thin coat of gesso on it, and you can just go ahead and paint directly on it. However, I prefer to have a really nice, smooth surface on what I paint, and this is no exception. This, for me, frankly, is too toothy. I don't like it. So, first step is wetting the back of the canvas, because what it does is it stretches it. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you have painted directly on a canvas before without any sort of like prep or anything, and you do tend to have heavy, soggy brush strokes, it warps. So I've wet the back of this canvas already. I did it with the foam brush, so this is also now just a little bit damp, which will help with spreading the gesso. If you're impatient like me, you can speed this process along with the help of a hairdryer, which is what I'm going to do. So this is pretty dry. I'm gonna move on to the next step. All right, everything is dry and I'm ready to go. Now, my foam brush is still a little bit damp, but that's okay, because that's gonna help with spreading our gesso. Now, I talked earlier about how it doesn't really matter what brand of gesso. That's just been in my experience. You might have a preference. Let me know in the comments if you do. I personally this is, I think, just a generic brand from the art store that I go to. There's no difference that I've noticed across brands, except for thickness. I just always try to aim for gessos that say thick, and if it's a thick enough gesso, I'll buy it again. So this one's okay. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. That's why I'm not really like showing the label and I'm not really saying the brand name, because I find it to be a little bit runnier than I'd like it to be. Like, I'd prefer it to be just a touch thicker. It's always important to get the edges when you're gessoing, because otherwise you'll be stuck with this weird kind of lip on your painting, which you might like the look of. I've seen some pieces where it actually kind of adds to it, but for the most part I prefer to gesso the sides as well, just so it's more fluid. You can just sand the edges down after, which is what I'm also going to do. Just need to move this to get the top edge. So I usually gesso on a flat surface because that way I can choose, if I decide to let it air dry, which I prefer to, it will settle and kind of flatten itself out and do a little bit of the work already, so I don't have to sand as much necessarily. I want to get a little bit more gesso on there. Now you can repeat this step as many times as you like. I like to do it about 2 or 3 times, personally. You want it thick enough so that when you do sand it down, you're not sanding it back to the original canvas. So that when you sand it, you're just sanding it to get smooth edges and nothing really more than that. Alright, now I'm going to go rinse my brush and I'm going to let this air dry so that it doesn't, so that it hopefully dries flat. Now one of the things you could do is bring out your trusty hairdryer again and blow dry it. However, one of the reasons why I don't want to do that is because then the brush strokes are more likely to dry into the gesso. So the strokes will harden, but if you leave them to dry, they might flatten out on their own with gravity. So we're gonna let it air dry and we're gonna come back to it and then we'll sand it down to give it a nice smooth surface. Okay, so now that you've put on your coat of gesso, I've actually put 2 coats on here and let it dry overnight, so it dried completely. You can see that there aren't that many brush strokes, but there is a little oopsie where I wanted to test and see if it was dry. It was not. So what we're going to do is we're going to sand everything down. We're going to sand our edges, make sure that they're nice and smooth and round, because right now they've got a little bit of a lip from the gesso that we applied. But we're going to make a nice smooth surface for us to paint on. I like to use this. It's essentially it's like sandpaper on all sides. You can pick one of these up at a hardware store. They're relatively inexpensive and they last a really long time. And it's just a lot more comfortable to hold than going at it with sandpaper, personally. This can take as long or as short as you like. It's up to personal preference and how smooth you like your surface. I like to have a really smooth surface, so I'm probably going to be sanding for a while. You also want to be careful not to press too hard onto your surface, because if you have not put enough layers of gesso on, what you'll end up doing is actually giving yourself more imperfections through the frame of the canvas. So just be careful when you're doing your sanding. Once you've completed sanding everything, it will be very dusty. It's not a bad idea to wear a mask when you're doing your sanding and when you're doing your cleanup, just so that you're not breathing in all the particulates from the gesso. But there you have it. That's a smooth surface. Thanks so much for watching this video. Hopefully you learned something. If you found it helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you'll be notified every time I release a new video. Till next time, my friends, have an excellent now and a wonderful today.